It's my Week 15 review, walking through the DraftKings Live Final and the FanDuel Fan Championship, and we're starting right now. What's up, guys? Welcome to another daily fantasy sports video. If this is your first time here and you want to become a profitable DFS player and get better at betting, start now by subscribing to the channel. Make sure you hit that notification bell so you don't miss anything along the way. And if you're already a Holkamaniac, you know exactly what time it is. Smash that like button and we'll get rolling. Only 15,000 people in this. A million to first. So a smaller field type of situation. Obviously, we have something like this on DraftKings at the $1,500 level this coming week. But through 7 entries into this, to be completely honest, the night before the live final, I couldn't sleep. I'm not sure why I was nervous. I was there as a +1. But for whatever reason, woke up around like 4:30 in the morning. So I got like a really early start on my morning. I think I was a little bit nervous that the stream wasn't going to work too because of how bad the internet was in this hotel we were in Miami. So I was up early. So I started like just building teams. Originally, I was just going to do some MME, saw this contest, and I was like, oh, I'll just build some game stacks for this contest. So I built 7 teams. Was fortunate enough to cash 5 of the 7, which was pretty good considering some things definitely went wrong. I mean, if you just see if you guys can see this here, if I move this down a little bit. So I was like right on the cash line for a bunch of these teams that cashed. So obviously nothing big, but I was on some decent game stacks. I kind of want to go through these quickly. So my best team was actually a Gardner Minshew stack, believe it or not. So one of the things that I thought was really interesting about this week overall, before we get too deep into it, was just these Jacksonville wide receivers, right? So Chris Conley, Keelan Cole, we knew that D.D. Westbrook was there as well, but no one was talking about Gardner Minshew. And I get that Kyler, especially on DraftKings, turned out to be kind of the pay down chalk. I thought Minshew was a fantastic tournament play because obviously if these guys are going to get there, Conley, Keelan Cole, and on DraftKings, obviously Conley was like 3,700. On FanDuel, 5,100. Pretty close to the Stone Min for someone that I believe is top 10 in air yards this season, like something outrageous like that. Obviously a good spot against Oakland. Oakland's a team that I believe was bottom 3 in defending the deep pass. He was 15% owned in this, so people were definitely on it. No one really played Keelan Cole. Keelan Cole almost got in the end zone as well, so he had 3 for 76. And these are the type of plays that really like help you out on FanDuel, right? It's not near as important to just kind of stack up like the Danny Amendola type of target share that you can kind of rack up a bunch of catches. These yardage guys are very valuable. So Keelan Cole is the one that I saw seeing the biggest bump in terms of his change in role with Chark out. So I actually like Keelan Cole a lot, especially at 2%. I played him with so Minshew, Fournette, Keelan Cole, and Conley. I faded D.D. D.D. gets struck me as the play out of those 3 that had the least amount of upside. So that was kind of my main core. I did like Darren Waller. Darren Waller was a lot easier to get on FanDuel. So my main stack was a Jacksonville stack. Did play Christian McCaffrey as a little bit of a one-off in this spot. And Kenyon Drake. So the Kenyon Drake debacle. We talked about him a little bit in the first look. Talked about it even more on the Fantasy Footballers DFS pod. With all this layered talk, and trust me, I had my fair share of layered this week. With all this layered talk, I just didn't really understand why Kenyon Drake was going to be drastically lower owned. So he kind of turned into the main pivot for me, which obviously worked out really well. It's part of the reason this team did really well, is because this was the only Kenyon Drake team that I did have that wasn't attached to Kyler. But what I liked about it, this construction at least, is it got me to the New England Patriots defense. Again, on FanDuel, it is a lot easier to jam in these high-priced defenses, and kind of sweating some stuff on DraftKings with a lot of cheaper defenses. On FanDuel, I wanted to kind of spread out what I thought were some of the best plays of the position. Jarvis Landry ended up being like a little bit of a mini stack here with Kenyon Drake, and that's something I've really been prioritizing when building game stacks. And I talk about this every week, but I want to hammer that home. Having a main stack, well, I prefer a 3-1, so 3 players, at least 3 to 4, and then bringing it back with one on the other side. Then the rest of the lineup have at least one spot that's a mini correlation of another game that I really like. So I like the Jacksonville-Oakland game quite a bit. Also like this Cleveland-Arizona game. So pretty easy game stack there. Minshew gives us a little bit on the ground. Wasn't a crazy game, but did have 27 rushing yards, 2 passing touchdowns. At 6,900, that was a great value. My next team was this Ryan Tannehill team. So Tannehill was someone that on DraftKings was going to be pretty popular, I thought, in the live final, which we'll get to. Only 12% on FanDuel, but A.J. Brown is a story here, though, right? So A.J. Brown, his price on FanDuel is 6,200. squarely in play, like drastically underpriced, I would say. On DraftKings, he was like 6,100, I believe. I thought he was a little too expensive based on his target share. Obviously, the upside is there. People are kind of, I don't know if it's a great comparison, but people are talking about him having Tyreek Hill-esque type of numbers. So one of the things that I was looking at with Nevs this week was just the yards per route run for A.J. Brown was just completely insane compared to like the rest of the league over the last 4 games. So I think he was at like 5.3 yards per route run, which, to give you a little bit of context, guys like Julio Jones, DeAndre Hopkins, Tyreek Hill, these guys are at like 2.3, 2.4. So that's an elite number. And he was like at 5, like so far and away ahead of where everyone else has been in terms of that efficiency-based metric. So A.J. Brown on FanDuel was pretty close to a lock, I would say. You can always make an argument for tournaments, but 23%, not surprising for him whatsoever. So I ended up not going with a full game stack on this team. So I went with Tannehill, A.J. Brown, brought it back with DeAndre Hopkins. And then I mentioned, like to have little mini game stacks. The problem, I guess, which, I mean, I had a ton of Saquon, a ton of Chris Carson, a ton of Christian McCaffrey on FanDuel. I ended up with a lot of Saquon with Laird because it gave me a little bit more correlation. Conley, Waller, again, a little mini stack. I preferred Conley if I was to choose one guy in this range. He was someone that was in the buy low model, liked Conley a lot. And then just another kind of volume back, Chris Carson. And then the Philly defense, again, I was trying to have some some lower owned defenses paying up to be contrarian a little bit. I liked Philly a lot against Washington. Obviously, 8 points, you'd like a little bit more from your defense than that, but I was pumped to get really low ownership on that stack for sure. Steve was saying he played Lindsey over Drake on FanDuel. Had to have been a pretty similar price though, right? But yeah, that was not great. Conley at 15%. Yeah, so Conley was 15% in this. That surprised me a little bit too, but like, man, that price was just like so bad. Honestly, like he wasn't looking great for a while. I think he had 1 catch after the first half, but then ends up getting the end zone twice and kind of bailing everyone out. But yeah, I thought Tannehill was fine. Like had a rushing touchdown this game, not a ton of yardage. Obviously on DraftKings doesn't even hit the bonus. But yeah, I mean, Tannehill is having a great year. So wanted to have at least one team with him. Next team that I had was kind of a full stack of Miami, and this is something that Nevs ended up doing on one of his teams in the live final as well, which we'll get to. But a lot of people, and I get it, right? There was win concerns in this game. Like obviously that should get you off of someone like Fitzpatrick who's going to air it out a little bit, but I sometimes think it's worth it. Where these games that like, I mean, I loved this game for pace. I loved it for plays. It was a very condensed target share. As soon as Devontae Parker was ruled active, I was willing to kind of ignore the weather a little bit, and maybe that was bad. But getting this type of ownership, Fitzpatrick 3%, Devontae Parker 9%. Patrick Laird obviously just gives me a lot of savings, but I like the idea of having him in this stack as well, and then bringing it back not with just Saquon, but also Darius Slayton, who I like quite a bit, another guy that I thought still had a reasonable role in this offense. Regardless, but yeah, with the win, maybe people don't go to the Darius Slayton thing. So this was a little bit of an anti-fragile team that hopefully if people just were off of this game and it still did well, I mean, there's still points scored, obviously. Got a ton of leverage out of that, which was great. So actually ended up with, I mean, this is just a full almost onslaught team. Did have Gesicki in it as well, which didn't really work out. But 2%, I think it was still okay to go to him in this spot. And then it was outside of that, KC defense and Christian McCaffrey. So just like what I think is probably the best running back play most weeks, regardless of kind of what happens. The usage, obviously, Christian McCaffrey gets in twice. Doesn't even. He was approaching the double bonus on DraftKings, which would have been kind of a disaster in the live final. But KC defense, 25% owned, 3,900 was just way too cheap for these guys. So I like the way this team was built. Obviously, pretty big onslaught. My one-offs, Christian McCaffrey and then A.J. Brown, like I talked about. Just thought he was too cheap on FanDuel. Let's keep working through these. I want to kind of fly through this and spend more time on the live final, but it was a good kind of showing in this tournament, so I thought I'd at least show you guys. I went through the best Fitzpatrick team. Okay, so again, the other side of this game, basically. So ran out an Eli stack with Saquon, with Slayton, with Shepard. Shepard was in the buy low model as well. Ended up bringing this one back with with Devontae Parker. So the one guy on the other side that I felt the most security with. Didn't play Patrick Laird on this one. I wanted at least one team where I had 3 of what I thought were some of the better running back plays on the slate. Obviously, our boy Lenny doesn't get there. Big Avelli, thanks for the follow, man. Appreciate that. Tampa Bay, I thought was in a reasonable spot, especially at their price on FanDuel, 3,800. They were kind of in that Kansas City range. A team that has been pressuring more lately, which is something I'm putting a lot of emphasis in. But I wanted to have at least one team with Zach Ertz. He ended up being 17%, but the injuries they have in Philly, I thought there was a chance that he could see just a ton of usage in this game. Only 5 catches, but did get in the end zone, which was just okay at that salary. But I still think the process was okay there for a little bit of a one-off with that spot. So let's keep working through this. I had a couple teams that didn't cash, obviously, too. But my last one that did was another Kenny and Drake team. No shocker there, I guess. Kyler Murray was a chalk on DraftKings on FanDuel. I thought I'd get him a little bit lower, which I did, 10%. Christian Kirk, the kind of clear option to pair him with. But again, like trying to have some sort of a game stack, Kenny and Drake with this team, bringing it back with Jarvis Landry, who is my favorite piece in the Cleveland side of this. Obviously, he had one of his, I guess, worst games of the season in a fantastic matchup, which wasn't great. But what I liked about this team, again, my main stack, but I also played Tyler Higbee, who I thought was one of the better plays on both sites. To be completely honest, he was 22% owned. Todd Gurley, Higbee brought it back with Gallup. Gallup, someone that I really liked as a bring back in this spot, just with Amari kind of dealing with Ramsey most of the game. Just didn't get there. Only 1 catch for 6 yards, wasn't great. Caught a little bit of leverage, but having a little mini stack there, I still think was really, really strong. Chris Carson one off again. Just my running back pool was extremely small this week. Patriots defense on this one. 2 teams that didn't cash. One of them was a Jameis team, believe it or not, but it was Jameis with Godwin. Justin Watson, I thought was going to be kind of the direct beneficiary of Evans and those deeper targets. Saw a bunch of usage the week before. He didn't quite get there. OJ Howard didn't quite get there. Obviously, the Jameis stack, well, you need a pairman, right? You think Chris Godwin could have had a massive game in this spot, but it didn't work out. My bring back was obviously Kenny Golladay. Hindsight, if this team had Amendola, I was actually pretty shocked because I had that one Jameis team, just all the wrong pieces with Jameis, which was frustrating. Chris Carson one off, Patrick Laird, Saquon together, and then Tennessee defense, which I liked as like a super low owned spot, which they ended up being minus 1%, under 1%. Just basically attacking a game that I thought was going to be popular, attacking Deshaun Watson, guy will take sacks, Tennessee above average in pressure rate. So like the construction on this team, regardless of the result there. Then I played the other side of this game as well in Arizona. Played a Baker stack with Jarvis Landry, Odell Beckham, brought it back with Christian Kirk. Unfortunately, no Drake on this one, but jammed in a bunch of running backs. Saquon, Carson, did have Laird in this spot. My one spot on FanDuel with Ian Thomas, who I thought was in play as well, that didn't quite work out. Did prefer Higbee in that range, but I thought Ian Thomas was fine. And then another Patriots defense spot. How much did I cash in this tourney? I'm honestly not even sure. I was like basically right around the cash line for most of it. Ended up profitable probably by about maybe a little over double up. I can't remember, something like that. Nothing massive though. Like I said, if you just look at kind of where I ended up, right around the cash line. But always nice to have some good tournament teams. But in terms of FanDuel overall, I've been playing more and more on this site than over the last few weeks. Shout out Steve, but I'm enjoying it so far. I think there's a little bit. It's fun to make teams on FanDuel because you can usually build. You don't have to really go extremely thin in order to make it work, with the salaries being a little bit loose over there in general. So in terms of the live final, kind of just want to shout out a few people that I got to hang out with. A bunch of these guys I knew from before, obviously. Bales and I used to work together. It was nice seeing him. I actually got to meet Osimo for the first time. That guy's hilarious. Honestly, he's exactly what you would think he'd be like in real life. He had a great showing, kind of came from behind on some teams at the end. So shout out Osimo. Scott Hanson, someone that I definitely have a ton of respect for. He's over at Roto Grinders, but he's won, I believe, 2 of these live finals. So was talking with him and Cal Spears. For those of you guys that don't know Cal's an awesome guy. We're kind of giving E. Scott a little bit of crap just because he just like shows up, wins the $2 million, then goes home every month or every year. So he had a pretty sharp team, I thought, which we'll get to. Obviously hung out with Manny for a little bit. Manny's Manny's just the man. So he was just coming to hang out. Obviously, he lives in Miami, so he stopped by. Jeff Collins, always kind of respect what he's trying to do in terms of live finals and his success with tournament teams. So shout out all those guys. It was kind of a rough showing for some of the regulars in this tournament for sure, but I do think there was some pretty nice opportunities for leverage. Ownership's tough in these type of tournaments. The chalk tends to go under-owned in these spots. I mean, just historically, people trying to get a little bit different. I will say that there was a bunch of people that had multiple entries as well. Not just multiple entries, like 4 and 5 entries. I think Osmo had 5 teams. He was maxed out. Peter Gibbons, who we'll talk about, who finished in second, had, I believe, 4 teams. So at that point, it gets even more spread out because we've talked about this before too. Kind of the optimal strategy in terms of having those multiple lineups is spreading out a little bit more so you don't have as much overlap. And you really kind of, ideally, you have a couple teams that are really poor, but also you end up on kind of those situations that do really well, especially with roster construction. A lot of people, I know Manny was talking about on his stream, a lot of people going with kind of those main game stacks that I was kind of going through on FanDuel. It was a very popular approach at the live funnel on DraftKings as well. So let's just jump into it over on the DraftKings side of things now. Again, so this was the Fantasy Football World Championship, $2 million to first. Pretty awesome event overall. I guess actually I should show you guys too. Speaking of Instagram, earlier posted a video from the weekend to give you guys a. Gonna have to log in. Instagram. All right. So bring you guys over here for a second. So the venue was awesome. So I guess you guys can't hear it, but there's a little bit of volume, but it was very cool. So there's Nevs. Brought my girlfriend to this one. She's never been to one of these things before, so that was a lot of fun. But the venue was really cool. So definitely think that just overall, DraftKings did an awesome job with kind of just getting us to like a really nice. I mean, to watch the games, like it really doesn't get much better than having like those TVs from the floor to the ceiling. Obviously, free food, free alcohol the entire weekend. They put on just a really cool event in general. I meant to go back to DraftKings, so let's move back over there. Anytime you have a chance in a 180-person field to take home $2 million, obviously it's really exciting. So shout out to 180 Degrees Miami, 220.9. Honestly, he was in first for most of the day. So I think he had a pretty sharp team overall. He did go with the Mahomes to Tyreek stack, which I thought was really sharp. We'll get to Nevs, obviously. Actually, let's go to him first, because that's where I have the most insight onto kind of what the thought process was. So Nevs finished in 22nd, 64th. Decent showing for 180 person field. He actually had both of his teams in the top 20 most of the day, with a decent amount of PMR that didn't completely get there, to be honest, which was tough. I think the big difference in terms of DraftKings versus FanDuel this week, I loved the Lions defense based on their price. They were 2,300. I expected them to be the chalk. So in the Millie Maker, I don't know if you can really look at it, but in higher stakes cash games, I was talking to Sean a decent amount as well. PSU. I think Detroit was like close to 35% in high stakes cash this week. So they only ended up with 2 sacks, 1 interception. Jameis with what I thought was going to be a banged up hand. Obviously, he was throwing the ball a lot better on Friday from what all the reports were. But targeting Jameis, I thought this was a great spot for Detroit at home. They don't quite get there. And getting 3 from your defense, and we have other teams like Patriots getting 20. I believe that Philly had 8. What was the other one? Someone got like 18 as well. I know Minnesota got there, but not. I mean, they were like unowned basically anyway. I'm sure we'll see them as we walk through this. But overall, so in terms of this first team, again, a Fitzpatrick stack, really just trying to take advantage of people being scared off of a really good situation overall. Getting Fitzpatrick at 2%. Patrick Laird, who was, again, really chalky in that range, 23%. Devontae Parker, bringing it back with Saquon. So I really like the idea of this stack for a lot of the same reasons that I talked about on the FanDuel team. I just think that as soon as Parker was ruled in and people were just freaking out about weather, I thought that became one of the really nice leverage spots on the slate. So Nevs pulled the trigger on that. Obviously, he ended up having Chris Carson in his flex spot, which I thought was strong. Tyler Higbee, who I've already talked about, I thought was far and away the best tight end play in the cheaper range. He was 34% in this, so definitely didn't get a ton of ownership discount there. Chris Godwin was someone that I felt like we had to have at least one share of. Like, to be completely honest, he had 40 in this game very easily. So I do think that we ran pretty bad with the injury there, which wasn't great. Chris Conley ended up being, again, far more heavily owned than I thought, but I mean, he was a great play in that range. Another kind of wrinkle to this contest in particular is there was no late swap. So you're kind of set with what you had before. Having at least some outs in the afternoon was something I think that you needed. So Higbee and Conley was left on this team. Obviously, this team doesn't completely get there when Drake's the guy you needed to have, obviously. But I still like the idea of having Saquon, Carson, Core. Patrick Laird obviously doesn't get there, which kind of killed this, but at least it was on a Fitzpatrick stack. Wasn't just a kind of a naked Patrick Laird out there that didn't get there. Hurts a little bit more. So his other team, 64th, I actually think that I like the construction even more from what Nevs did on this team. So he faded Higbee. I would assume that he was looking for a little bit lower ownership than 27%. So like basically everyone had Higbee or Thomas in the cheap range. Did play Saquon and Carson. So he had Saquon and Carson on both of his teams. So shout out to Nevs. Sharp play there. Ended up fading Christian McCaffrey completely. Todd Gurley on this team. Again, Todd Gurley and Michael Gallup. I like the idea of kind of this little mini stack that he had in here, along with Patrick Mahomes to Tyreek Hill. Again, people freaking out about this weather. When I saw Nevs on Sunday morning, the first thing he said to me is, we have to have a Mahomes Tyreek Hill stack. Like, that was the thing that he was on from the very start of the week, he said. So shout out to him for staying with that. Only 67 yards for Tyreek, but obviously getting the end zone twice. What's great about what happened for him, his main stack, Mahomes, Tyreek, both got 2 touchdowns. Fitzpatrick and Parker both get 2 touchdowns. Has Saquon and Carson both locked in on both teams, gets 2 touchdowns from both. Gurley gets in the end zone 2 times. It was a crazy week overall for touchdown. A lot of these guys didn't have a ton of yardage, but it was a really interesting week. Greg Ward was lower owned than I thought, but he was probably a little bit thin. Again, got bailed out, like scored with the last like 24 seconds or so. He was stone min, but just all those injuries in Philly. I preferred personally the Tampa Bay cheap wide receivers. And like I said, it wasn't even Perriman. I thought that in general, there was some options that we could go to for a super cheap price tag in Tampa Bay. It was something that I preferred. Gallup just not getting there is unfortunate. Him at 11%, I wish he would have been a little bit lower. But I mean, good construction, I think, overall for Nevs taking a stand. Yeah, the wind is not great, Doozy. Like, that's something that I try and steer clear of. But everything that I was looking at least on Twitter from the beat writers and stuff, it looked like at least in the stadium, it wasn't quite as bad as people were fearing. Maybe going that way was a little bit aggressive, but it ended up working out. I think that the condensed target share, a game with 2 really poor defenses, sometimes you can battle through the wind a little bit if you think there's enough leverage there, and that's kind of what I think he was going for. Yeah, Gallup and Golladay both disappointing. Unfortunate, because that was like a pretty popular bring back for a lot of people in those games. Amendola gets there. Obviously, it was a pretty big game for Zeke on the other side of that Dallas and Rams game. So, yeah, I think that's pretty good showing, honestly. I think that where we were at going into the afternoon with 2 shares, we had the full fade on Robert Woods, which ended up working out pretty well also. And then I believe Kyler was the highest owned quarterback in this. Let's see if we can find one. Yeah, Kyler was 18.3%, and I think he was the chalkiest quarterback on the slate in terms of just the live final. So it was a really interesting spot overall. But I think that Nevs did a great job. Shout out to him. He's having an awesome season across a bunch of different sports right now. Peoria Dolphin, didn't miss your tier 1, man. Appreciate you being with us for 3 months. So let's talk through some of these other guys that I mentioned earlier. Let's start with Osimo. So Osimo honestly came from behind really late. That last Julio Jones touchdown was big for his 4th place team. So let's talk about his construction a little bit. Obviously, he had 5 seats, so was able to spread out a little bit here. But I mean, 3 teams in the top 35, 2 in the top 15. Not getting all the way to the top, but still an awesome week for Osimo. So Derek Carr to Darren Waller, brought it back with Chris Conley, who, I mean, pretty necessary at that salary range on this slate. Also played Ty Johnson, which I thought was really interesting. I believe the guy that got second place also played Ty Johnson. So that wasn't really something that I was on, but at Stoneman 3K, he also was able to play Danny Amendola on this team. So like kind of weird mini stacks, to be completely honest, but he does have some correlation here. And one off with Saquon Barkley, Julio Jones, and Christian McCaffrey. So like just some high volume there. Julio is 12%. We'll talk about a lot of people that had Julio, because a lot of the guys that I really respect as being sharp players were all over Julio in this spot. We talked about him on the first look as just, it seems like just like these really bad spots for Julio when he's either banged up or whatever it is. These are the games where he just goes nuts, where no one wants to play him. So 12%, I would imagine across the industry wasn't anywhere near that. Let's see. I just want to see his ownership in the Millionaire Maker. Let's see. Yeah. Julio's 5% in the million. Those are the weeks you want Julio. So he drops a 40 bomb. That second touchdown, I believe, was like, so Austin was in fourth. He was in 6th or 7th at the time. So that brought him from $150,000 to $500K just on that. And that was obviously really late in the slate. Gavin with 10 gifted subs. What's up, Gavin? Thanks, man. Appreciate that. It's very generous of you. If you just got gifted a sub by Gavin, let him know in the chat. Make sure you guys say thank you. To turn off some of these event sounds, or people are going to go crazy. But I do appreciate it, man. Thanks so much. So in terms of the rest of this team, not too much more to say about it. I do think it was really sharp to get on Christian McCaffrey, 26% in this. A lot of people made that work. His team in 14%, or his 14th place, did have a Minshew stack. Again, kind of what we talked about before, stacking up some of these really cheap wide receiver options. Keelan Cole, Chris Conley ended up fading Dede, very similar to what I did on that FanDuel team. And then he gets in all the running backs: Saquon, Chris Carson, Christian McCaffrey. You guys know I can respect that. And with what we thought was going to be a really highly owned A.J. Brown, he goes Corey Davis. And I thought Corey Davis was actually really sharp at 3,800 because of that price point. I'm not a big Corey Davis fan, but in a game that everyone really liked, I think just taking the savings there when A.J. Brown was significantly more expensive. Was sharp, paid up a little bit to be contrarian at defense, 8 points for that, and Darren Waller. So he did have, he was pretty exposed to Darren Waller overall. Obviously, just gives him, that was the viable bring back, in my opinion, for these Jacksonville stacks. Faded our boy Lenny as well. So shout out to Awesome, another really well-constructed team. Looks like he had a Dak Gallup stack. Doesn't bring it back with anyone on the Rams. So I guess what we're noticing here from Osimo is he didn't feel the need to completely stack up a lot of these games. Had a little, like basically a lot of little mini stacks, Saquon Barkley Giants, good correlation stuff for that sort of thing, but not going out of his way to fully game stack. Another Ty Johnson Amendola situation, so he must have really liked the cheaper options there against Tampa Bay. Another Dak team, this one with Amari. Amari ended up being 5% in this, which is interesting. Only one catch. So he was basically all in on Ty Johnson and Danny Amendola. Interesting. This was this Watson stack. So we did have one DD share, another Darren Waller team. Very tight. I mean, basically play the same running backs on every team. Carson, Saquon, T.Y. Carson, Saquon, Gurley. Carson, Saquon, T.Y. Saquon, Carson, McCaffrey. Saquon, Ty Johnson, McCaffrey. So, I mean, he had the core. There's a reason this guy's in these for sure. Didn't feel like he went as off the board as I expected, but it was a pretty chalky week overall. So yeah, interesting spot. Saquon 43%. Steve's talking about in the chat. Saquon 43, Carson at 49. If you didn't have both, like you were in trouble. This 180 person field size tournament. So shout out Osimo. Who should we go to next? Talk about Bales' team. So Bales overall, like obviously getting 106 isn't the result you would like. But what's interesting about Bales' team is he didn't really have anyone going in the morning game. So he had Saquon going, which was a pretty good start. And then I believe Ian Thomas was in the beginning as well. Had Robert Woods left, had Christian Kirk to Kyler. Looks like he didn't play anyone on the other side of the Arizona game, but did have Todd Gurley, Michael Gallup. Oh, another one with Michael Gallup that was right there with us. So at least that feels good. Mini stack with Woods, Gurley, and Gallup. Didn't play Higbee. I would assume Bales just thought Higbee was going to be relatively highly owned. Another guy that played Julio. So seeing Julio at 12% should just give you an idea of how sharp this field was, because I think that's a direction people went when a lot of these other games started to kind of carry some win concerns. So that's interesting. And someone was asking about Ty Johnson. I didn't ask him about the Ty Johnson play, but I am curious. He wasn't on my radar. But 3K probably just made his construction work. Shout out Bales. Bales actually went to Puerto Rico for the FanDuel final. He was there on Friday, all the way back for the live final on Sunday in Miami. So I guess he had already booked a bunch of stuff over there. I talked to him about it. Got to meet his wonderful girlfriend as well, who was a lot of girlfriends on this trip, to be honest, which I guess is not the norm for these live finals, but at least the worst, at least they weren't, they're just kind of sitting there by themselves, which is what can happen at these probably 95% male live finals. But shout out Bales. It's good seeing him. Who else should we talk about? Let's look at Jeff Collins' team. We had 2 seats. Obviously, like you guys probably saw his tweet yesterday, not a great showing for Jeff, but I do think that he took a big stand that didn't work out. And his big stand, again, we were just talking about the ownership for Saquon, for Chris Carson. Jeff went for the full fade on both of those guys. Did have Fournette at 16%, played Todd Gurley. But both of these teams, he decided to go double tight end with both of them. As you guys know, that's not something that I typically do, but I do think in general his correlation, or at least what he was going for, was solid. So Matt Ryan at 4%. Julio obviously ended up being a more popular one-off and stack candidate, but did have Hooper as well. So obviously the injuries that we had, like Calvin Ridley to the IR, the target share for Atlanta, like good players in a bad spot, obviously against San Francisco, can still get there. I like the thought process with Hooper. I think at that point, maybe playing Ertz with him might have been a little bit aggressive, but that's kind of what you have to do in these live finals. Just Rams at 5%. I actually don't hate that at all. High total game, 2,900. High paced game, I should say. A lot of pass attempts on the other side. Targeting Dak isn't something that I'm typically doing, but yeah, I think that the process that led him to this type of construction was reasonable. Rams, Gurley defense, kind of a one-off with Fournette, with a lot of people on the Jacksonville wide receivers. So like this is a very well thought out leverage team for sure. Again, Corey Davis, mentioned him as a decent pivot off of AJ Brown for significantly cheaper. So I mean, obviously the results don't look great, but I think there was definitely some thought out leverage in that spot. The other one, obviously running pretty bad with Jameis to Godwin. OJ Howard, again, I had a team like this on FanDuel that didn't perform very well either. He brought it back with Chris Conley. Josh Jacobs, sorry, this is the other game. So who did you bring it back with? Doesn't bring it back with anyone on Detroit, which hard to fault him for that. So Josh Jacobs, Conley, mini stack. I do like doing this like one side of the game script with like a running back that's pretty game script dependent, honestly, like not super active in the passing game. So if Oakland was going to get ahead, Chris Conley, good game script. I think that's sharp. Dalvin Cook, I restrained myself from playing Dalvin Cook this week. Normally I'm right there with people for this Dalvin Cook floor game. Obviously he gets hurt too. So some tough injuries here for Jeff. Redskins at 3%. I thought the Redskins were actually really interesting. I'm not probably going to target someone like Wentz who doesn't really turn the ball over much, but the Redskins have been pressuring a good amount, so he probably deserved a little bit better there. Ian Thomas, again, super chalky. 2 tight end construction. He must not have been in love with, clearly not in love with chalk running backs, which tough week to be on the other side of the running back chalk for sure. Super Freak says, I'd leave my wife at home. Yeah, that's the play. My girlfriend hadn't been to one of these yet, so had to make it work. And had to keep Chris's wife, or Nev's wife, company. All right, so who else? Might as well just go through all these guys that I was kind of spending some time with while we were there. So Scott Hanson. I mentioned he has won, I believe, 2 of these live finals. Tough showing for him as well. So a lot of really sharp people struggled a little bit in this final. Raheem Mostert. So this is one that I guess people were on. I went pretty heavily on the other side. If anyone listened to the Fantasy Footballers DFS pod, I told if anyone was playing Mostert in cash, I would build a cash team and play them for any amount. Basically, I guess I wasn't really in on this 3-headed backfield. I get the talent, all of that. I guess like couldn't reasonably project him for even like 15 touches. So these are the guys that I don't really play. But again, I preferred Laird in that range anyway, so it's not like it really mattered. Drake would have been my second choice, like I mentioned on the FanDuel side of things. But he's got Matt Ryan to Julio Jones to Austin Hooper, very similar to Jeff on that thought process. He brought it back with Mostert, so I guess that maybe that had some part of his thought process there. Christian McCaffrey, you're not going to get any pushback from me on that play, that's for sure. And then he went with Darius Layton as a one-off. Again, 9.4%. He's like, with all these guys coming back for the Giants, I thought his role was pretty safe. So he did get in the end zone, only 2 catches in the spot. Just kind of, I guess, an example of how spread out it was. But obviously Saquon taking a bunch of touchdowns away wasn't great. Robert Woods, I thought was a really great play. I saw him at 13%. I actually got a little bit nervous because I thought he'd be a lot more heavily owned than that as well. Both Lions D on both of his teams. So as soon as we started chatting about that, I felt a little bit better that Nevs decided to do the same thing. His other team, he was pretty happy with obviously 5% in Amari Cooper. We talked about him a little bit. But yeah, basically just the Dak to Cooper, just trying to get leverage. He definitely got some lower owned plays. Again, Keelan Cole with a lot of talk on Conley. There's ways this could have gone right for him for sure. Again, another 2 tight end team. Ian Thomas, Higbee, very popular, but another 2 tight end spot is interesting. I mentioned Nevs went with both of his teams were the Detroit defense. He actually mentioned to me a 2v2 that he was considering that actually would have gotten him all the way to 11th. So let's see. So 11th would have been 80. So about a 50K swing. So not like an epic disaster considering like what's at the top of this tournament, obviously. But his 2v2 I thought was really interesting. So he was deciding between Chris Carson and Lions defense and Todd Gurley and Patriots defense. Like obviously I preferred Chris Carson, most people. I thought the Lions were a good pay down, but we liked Gurley at 6K. And I think maybe it's bad to have 2 defenses. You have 2 teams to really just be like all in on a defense. I mean, getting 3 from your defense really hurts you in this spot. So I don't know. I don't know what was right. Obviously, he went with what he thought best play at the time. And like I said, all things considered, wasn't a huge difference. But I saw E. Scott did the same thing. So maybe I'm on the wrong side of that one. Let's see. Who else did I mention? Let's look at Cal's team. So Cal had 3 seats. I think he had 3 in the FanDuel one as well, but Cal was there. Awesome guy. 75th, 90th, and 100th. So kind of middle of the pack, basically, with all these teams. He was all over this Houston game. Deshaun Watson, DeAndre Hopkins brought it back with Corey Davis. A lot of people went sharp people went the Corey Davis route because it just felt like A.J. Brown was a little bit too expensive for DraftKings. I almost always see Cal go with a wide receiver in the flex, which I'm warming up to in a top-heavy format, like a live final, like some of these larger field tournaments. I do think that the ceiling for those wide receivers, especially if we weren't in love with the running backs, make a lot of sense. So I almost knew that he was going to play Josh Jacobs. Got him at 4.5%. We talked about him the night before. If he was going to be active, get him in a great spot against Jacksonville, a team that can't stop the run, but obviously not super healthy. Did have 89 on the ground, 20 receiving yards. So ran pretty bad as far as getting the bonus, but this is what you get from a guy like that. 2 receptions. I guess I tend not to play those guys in that price range. He did have a Kyler team as well with Christian Kirk. Decided to not bring that one back. I'm sorry. And did play the Mostert kind of Leo kind of mini stack there. Tyreek Hill one-off, which definitely don't hate that at 6%. Did have Godwin on this team as well, who I thought was a great play. Godwin against Lions defense. Nevs did the same thing. So more of like just a price thing. And I'll ask you guys in the chat too. I know I've been kind of rambling a little bit here. But playing a defense against your wide receiver, I get that that's not correlated, but like, does this matter if it's Jameis? Because I think that Jameis probably correlates pretty well to the opposing defense. Just more opportunities for the amount of picks that he's been throwing. So interesting. Probably a price thing for Cal, though, I'd imagine. He did have a Matt Ryan to Julio stack as well. So I guess he did have one A.J. Brown team. This one had Fuller, so kind of a little bit of a mini game stack there. Emmanuel Sanders on the Hooper side. So a bunch of little mini game stacks. So Giants at 13%, another team that was pretty popular against Miami, 2,700, popular route if you're going to be paying down. So we talked about a lot of teams. Let's talk about a couple of the winners now. The first place team mentioned a lot of these plays already, but you did have Saquon, Christian McCaffrey, Boston Scott. So believe it or not, Kenyon Drake was not on the winning lineup. 3K for Boston Scott. Wasn't someone that I really considered, but did have 7 catches. So if you're thinking of him as like more of a wide receiver, I suppose that's fine. Did play Greg Ward as well. It allowed him to get up to all the studs basically. So Mahomes stack with Tyreek, Saquon, Christian McCaffrey. His other cheaper wide receiver was Conley, and paying up for the Patriots defense. So Patriots defense breaking the slate a little bit again. So very interesting. Usually defense doesn't matter. I'm mostly on that side of the spectrum. But yeah, congrats. 180 degrees Miami. Really solid team overall. Mr. Good Seats. Another Ty Johnson, Danny Amendola, little mini stack. But shout out Mr. Good Seats. I know Manny was his proxy, so we talked a little bit about his team for a little bit as well. Packers defense. A lot of the same plays up top, obviously. But Peter Gibbons basically vaulted the entire field from where this team was originally. Like played Devontae Adams at 1%. Love the idea of playing good players and at no ownership. Kenyon Drake 8%. Did have Zeke as well at 4%. So he had some pretty crazy leverage with some pretty good plays overall. So obviously Peter Gibbons, one of the sharper guys out there across like really any sport. So he did have 2 in the top 10. So hell of a payday for Peter Gibbons. Shout out to him. Someone in the chat saying, can you go more into how you uncover players like Ward or Perriman or these lesser known players? It's basically just opportunity, man. So like how injured both of those wide receiver corps were, like you can project them both for a reasonable target share in good offenses. So I think that Greg Ward had some like 8 targets the week before. He was 3K. So with the injuries there, he just became a kind of a salary saving option. He's someone that works in the slot a little bit. So I don't think that Greg Ward really had the upside of someone like Conley or even Keelan Cole for that matter. If you want to learn more about how to be a profitable DFS player and get better at betting, start now by hitting the subscribe icon in the bottom right hand corner so you don't miss anything. If you want to take that a step further, definitely come hang out with us on Twitch, twitch.tv/Joe Holka. Come hang out with the community. You won't regret it.